My brother was arrested after he drugged a girl and hit and ran someone, and my parents tried to force me to take the fall. When I refused to lie for him, they lost control, blamed me for everything, and tried to destroy the stable life I built. Hey Reddit, I grew up the scapegoat while my brother was the golden child. Years later, he racked up charges in one night, and my parents tried to pin everything on me. Before it all went insane, here's how it started. Hey, I'm Colin. I'm 32. I work in IT documentation, which is basically explaining things to people who swear they already know everything. Pretty fitting considering the family I come from. I grew up with my parents, Bradley Walker and Scarlett Walker, and my younger brother Anderson. If you're wondering why I'm using their real names, yeah, I'm not protecting anybody here. I'll just say this up front so the rest of the story makes sense. My family dynamic wasn't exactly the Brady Bunch, unless there's a version where one kid is the designated disappointment and the other is the second coming of royalty. Guess which one I was. My parents had this magical ability to interpret every situation in a way that ended with Anderson being the misunderstood prodigy and me being the cause of literally anything that went wrong. If you're thinking, no way, parents aren't actually like that, just wait. You'll see. Growing up, I didn't really get the normal sibling rivalry stuff. It was more like sibling hierarchy. If both of us were involved in something that broke, spilled, cracked, or made noise, Bradley would show up like some off-brand Sherlock Holmes, look around for 2 whole seconds, and then somehow turn to me like, we both know whose fault this is. Anderson could burn toast, and it'd be my fault for distracting him. School wasn't much different. Teachers would call home about Anderson messing around, and the next day Bradley would be stomping through the hallways, giving long speeches about how his precious son was being targeted. Meanwhile, I brought home one talks too much in class note, and suddenly I was one step away from joining a street gang. By the time I was a teenager, I had basically given up trying to win points. I worked part-time, saved my own money, bought my own stuff. Anderson? He rotated between hobbies, quitting jobs after a week, sleeping till noon, and recovering from stress like he was out there fighting dragons instead of playing video games all night. Scarlett always had this dramatic way of stepping in whenever Anderson messed up. Picture someone who's watched too many courtroom dramas and thinks she's the lead actress. She'd throw her hand to her chest, sigh deeply, and say something like, "He's under so much pressure. You don't understand the weight on him." On him? He didn't even do his own laundry. When I got old enough, I moved out basically the second I could afford to. I wasn't running away or anything, just removing myself from the endless rerun of Colin Did It. I got an apartment, started working full-time, lived like a normal adult. You know, paying bills, cooking my own meals, not having my father lecture me about the angle of my posture. I still visited sometimes. Holidays, birthdays, the usual family obligations, society guilt trips you into. And sure enough, nothing had changed. I'd be helping set the table, and Anderson would walk in 2 hours late wearing sunglasses indoors, and Bradley would greet him like he's the prodigal son returning from battle. Then he'd look at me and ask why I wasn't helping more. Every once in a while, a relative would say something stupid like, "You know your parents love you both the same." Yeah, okay. And I'm Batman. I stayed out of the drama as much as I could. I had my own life, my own routine, my own sanity to protect. But even from a distance, I could tell Anderson wasn't exactly thriving. He had the attitude of someone who thought responsibilities were optional unless someone else was doing them for him. But since Bradley and Scarlett covered everything, he never faced consequences for, well, anything. I kept thinking maybe adulthood would smack some sense into him, but nope. Anderson just got older, not wiser. Imagine watching someone play life on easy mode with cheat codes and still manage to fall off the map. I didn't step in. I didn't interfere. I didn't try to fix it. Not my job, not my responsibility, and definitely not my circus anymore. But here's the thing about someone who grows up thinking they're untouchable. Eventually, they test just how far that protection goes. And the day Anderson finally pushed it too far, Bradley and Scarlett came knocking on my door like I was supposed to clean up the mess. I didn't. But that's getting ahead of myself. Before everything went completely nuclear, we had a few more levels to fall through. And trust me, this family had plenty of room left to crash. So, Anderson getting special treatment wasn't exactly new territory, but things got interesting once he started dating Riley. And by interesting, I mean I got to watch a perfectly normal girl try to navigate the psychological escape room that was my family. Poor thing never had a chance. Riley and Anderson met in their mid-20s. She was genuinely nice, polite, responsible, the type of person who actually returned shopping carts. For the first 6 months, you could squint and almost pretend Anderson was functioning like a regular adult. They went out, took trips, posted couple selfies. Mom was thrilled. Dad acted like Anderson had discovered fire. Meanwhile, I sat there thinking, all right, let's see how long this illusion lasts. Not long. Shocker. The first red flags were small. Riley would mention Anderson getting upset over nothing, her talking to a male coworker, her being 10 minutes late, her not replying instantly. Normal relationship stuff for insecure people, except Anderson's insecurity had rockets attached to it. Scarlett always took his side naturally. She'd say things like, he's just passionate, or, you know how sensitive he is. Yeah, sensitive, like a landmine. Riley tried to make it work, though. She was patient in the way only people with hope still in their system can be. The substance stuff started creeping in slowly. At first it was just recreational. You know, the classic excuse, everyone does it, don't worry. Except not everyone does it 3 times a week and hides it like they're in a spy thriller. Anderson would come home edgy, pupils huge, acting like he'd unlocked higher brain functions when he could barely operate the microwave. Riley mentioned it to Scarlett once. Big mistake. Scarlett acted like Riley had accused Anderson of tax evasion. Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. He's under stress. You're misreading him. Right. The man couldn't even read his own employment contract. But sure, let's trust his sense of reality. Then came the shouting. Neighbors called the police once. I only found out because Scarlett ranted to me over the phone, like she was the one whose door got knocked on by 2 officers trying to figure out if someone was being murdered. She insisted Riley was exaggerating and that Anderson just raises his voice sometimes. If that was raising his voice, then Godzilla was just slightly cranky. Still, Riley stayed longer than she should have. People like her always hold on hoping the person they love will magically transform. Spoiler, he didn't. The breaking point came after a fight so bad, Riley didn't even go back to pack her stuff. She called me from a friend's place, voice shaking, asking if Anderson ever took responsibility for anything. I told her as gently as I could, Riley, he's never even taken responsibility for where he puts his own keys. Before disappearing from his life completely, she did something incredibly smart. She backed up everything. Messages, call logs, screenshots, even a few short videos. Not because she was planning to build a case, but because she knew one day someone was going to need proof. Turns out she was right. Scarlett's reaction to the breakup? She's just bitter, trying to ruin him. Of course, because who wouldn't be jealous of a man who sleeps till noon and treats responsibilities like urban legends? Anderson, unsurprisingly, didn't handle the breakup well. He went full freefall. New friends, louder parties, new substances he claimed were totally safe, because that's what every reckless person says right before doing something incredibly stupid. He'd show up in family group chats at 2 a.m. posting cryptic nonsense. Bradley would excuse it as venting. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. I wasn't involved, wasn't advising, wasn't cleaning up. I'd learned a long time ago that trying to steer Anderson in any direction was like trying to train a tornado. But even from the outside, you could tell things were getting bad. There's a certain point where someone's self-destruction stops being an issue and becomes a countdown. And with Anderson, you could practically hear the timer ticking. I'd like to say I didn't see what was coming, but honestly, when someone keeps pushing boundaries because no one has ever made them face consequences, eventually they collide with the real world. Hard. So, here's where the story stops being your typical, my family is dysfunctional rant, and turns into something that honestly still feels unreal, even when I write it down. Up until this point, Anderson's life was basically a slow, messy slide downhill, the kind of train wreck you could see coming from half a state away. But then came that night. The night where Anderson finally discovered consequences exist in the real world, and he reacted exactly how you'd expect someone who'd never faced any to react. Terribly. This all happened on a random Friday night. I wasn't there, obviously. I was at home watching crappy reality TV with my girlfriend and trying to convince myself leftovers counted as a real dinner. Meanwhile, Anderson was out at some party with people whose names he probably didn't even know. From what I pieced together later, he'd already been using stuff before he even got there, because self-control was never part of his skill set. Anyway, that's when he met Zoe. Zoe was just some girl at the party, as far as he was concerned. A normal person out for a night with friends. She had no idea she was about to walk into the Anderson experience, which is basically a roller coaster built without safety inspections. They talked for a bit, hit it off enough for him to convince her to come back to his apartment. So she goes. She had no reason to suspect anything. And look, I'm not going to go into details because I'm not here to exploit anyone's trauma. But the important part is this. Anderson gave her something. Some substance that he downplayed. Acted like it was harmless. Maybe even made it sound like something everyone uses. He lied. Or at best, conveniently left out the truth. Within minutes, Zoe realized something was wrong. Like medically, dangerously wrong. Dizzy, panicked, everything spinning. And here's the part that still gets me. She managed to get out. She actually got out of his apartment and made it to someone who could get her help. That alone probably saved her life. She ended up in the ER, where the doctors figured out fast that she had a substance in her system she never knowingly agreed to. And because hospitals actually take that kind of thing seriously, unlike my parents, the police were contacted immediately. Meanwhile, back at the frat house energy apartment, Anderson noticed Zoe was gone and did what any rational human being would not do. He panicked, like immediately went into full chaos mode. Instead of waiting for a knock on the door or calling anyone or doing literally anything that didn't involve breaking the law, he grabbed his keys, stumbled into his car, and drove off. Yeah, because that was definitely the smart choice. From what the report said later, he blew through a couple of stop signs and then crashed into another car. Could have been worse, could have been a person. But the idiot still made it worse. Because after the collision, did he check on anyone? Call emergency services? Nope, he fled. Just straight up ran like he was starring in some low-budget action movie where fleeing the scene magically resets everything. By the time the police tracked the plate number, matched it to the damaged vehicle, and followed the trail, he had already ditched the car at my parents' house like they were his personal evidence disposal unit. Real genius move. Nothing screams innocence like hiding your wrecked vehicle behind Bradley's grill set. I didn't hear about any of this until the next morning. I woke up, looked at my phone, and saw 16 missed calls from Scarlett, 3 from Bradley, and 2 random numbers. My brain went straight to either someone died or Anderson finally managed to crash his life into a wall. It was basically option B with bonus chaos. I sighed, hit call, and barely got one ring before Scarlett picked up. "Colin! Oh, thank God, finally!" she sobbed, loud enough that I had to pull the phone away. "Good morning to you too," I muttered. "What happened now?" Before she could answer, Bradley's voice bulldozed into the call like he grabbed the phone right out of her hand. "They're targeting him, Colin," he said, already out of breath. "This is completely blown out of proportion." Scarlett cut him off. She misunderstood. That girl misunderstood everything, Bradley yelled over her. "We need you here, now. Do you hear me?" I blinked at the ceiling. I hadn't even had coffee yet. "Can someone explain what the hell happened?" I asked. Scarlett sniffed loudly. "Your brother. He's been unfairly arrested." I sat up. "Unfairly arrested? That's what we're calling it?" Bradley jumped back in. "Colin, the police are exaggerating. They always exaggerate." "Uh-huh," I said. "What did he actually do?" There was a beat of silence. Then Scarlett said, in the tiniest dramatic whisper, "A girl is making accusations." I rubbed my face. "Accusations," I repeated. "Right. Totally normal phrasing." "She's lying, Colin," Scarlett insisted immediately. "She's trying to ruin Anderson's life," Bradley added. "This is why we need you here. We need to get ahead of this. The police are twisting the situation." They kept talking over each other, voices rising and falling like some kind of dysfunctional choir. The more they rambled, the more obvious it became that Anderson wasn't just unfairly arrested. He was buried in actual serious trouble, the kind you don't talk your way out of with a stern lecture and a family lawyer. And knowing my parents, I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't them calling for help. This was them preparing to drag me into the mess. By the time I threw on some clothes and drove over to my parents' place, the whole street already looked like something happened. Their blinds were half closed in that awkward, "we want privacy, but also want the neighbors to ask questions" way. Bradley's truck was parked sideways, like he was too stressed to remember how to park. Great start. I walked in without knocking. Scarlett was pacing the living room holding a wad of tissues, like she was preparing for an award-winning crying scene. Bradley sat at the table flipping through papers, like he suddenly became a lawyer overnight. Anderson was nowhere in sight, which, considering everything, was its own red flag. Scarlett gasped when she saw me. "Colin, thank God!" "You took so long." "It's been 20 minutes, I said. "Calm down before you dislocate something." Bradley cleared his throat, pretending to stay composed. "Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." "Let me guess," I said, dropping onto the couch. "Anderson didn't get arrested for breathing too loudly. So what actually happened?" They both looked at each other like they hadn't rehearsed this part. Scarlett finally whispered, "The police came here early this morning." Bradley added, They found the car. The car? I repeated. What car? His car. Bradley exhaled sharply. It's damaged. They're saying he fled the scene. Ah yes, the fleeing. The cherry on top of the disaster sundae. Scarlett jumped in. But that's not all. A girl. Zoe. She made a report at the hospital. She's claiming Anderson? I get it. I cut in gently. I read between the lines. Scarlett wiped her eyes dramatically. She misunderstood the situation. She panicked. She doesn't know him. Yeah, because everyone who meets Anderson is supposed to immediately understand that he's a walking bad decision with hair gel. What did the police actually say? I asked. Bradley hesitated, then shoved a paper toward me. These are the charges they're considering. But they're exaggerating. The police always exaggerate. Right. Because law enforcement totally has nothing better to do than personally target a 30-year-old man-child. The charges listed were not small. Possession, impaired driving, leaving the scene, and a charge related to administering a controlled substance without Zoe's consent. It wasn't an official list yet, but even the possible charges section looked like a resume you'd rather not have. Where's Anderson? I asked. Scarlett sniffed. They took him. They just took him. So he was in custody. Good. Maybe he'd finally come face to face with reality instead of sprinting away from it. Then, like they'd been waiting for the perfect moment, Bradley leaned forward. Colin, we need your help. Here it comes. What help? I asked flatly. You have to understand. Your brother is fragile. He can't handle this. He handled fleeing a crash just fine, I said. Bradley ignored that. We need to show the police that some of the things they found weren't his. They need to see he wasn't responsible for all of it. I stared at them. What are you suggesting? Scarlett lowered her voice like she was sharing a recipe. Maybe you could explain that the things in the car were yours, or that you were there earlier. Something to take the pressure off him? There it was. Not even sugar-coated. Let me get this straight, I said. You want me to lie to the police and say the drugs they found belonged to me, and that I borrowed Anderson's car before he crashed it? Scarlett's eyes widened like I was the dramatic one. Not lie, just clarify things. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable even for them. You two are unbelievable, I said. And I mean that literally. Nobody would believe this level of stupidity. Bradley slammed his hand on the table. Watch your tone. Your brother needs you. Then maybe he should have thought of that before turning his life into a Grand Theft Auto side mission. Scarlett gasped. How can you joke at a time like this? Because if I don't joke, I'll start screaming, I replied. Before they could launch into another guilt trip monologue, the front door opened and a detective stepped inside with a polite nod. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, he said. We pulled security footage from the apartment building this morning. Scarlett straightened her hair like this was a surprise guest instead of a detective. Yes, of course. How can we help? He lifted a tablet. At around 4:30 in the morning, 2 people entered Anderson's unit using his code. They were inside long enough to move items around. I turned slowly toward my parents. They froze, like the pause button had been pressed on both of them at once. Bradley cleared his throat too quickly. We were just checking on his things. He was upset. We were helping. The detective didn't blink. Sir, entering a scene and moving items after an incident can be considered evidence tampering. Scarlett's hand flew to her mouth. We didn't mean anything. We were protecting our son. I understand what you meant, the detective said evenly, tapping notes into the tablet. But intent doesn't change what it looks like on camera. We'll need you both to come in and give statements. They nodded stiffly, like kids being told to sit in the corner. As soon as he left, Bradley looked at me with this wild, desperate expression. See what you've done? If you had stepped in, let me stop you right there, I said. This mess? This is all Anderson. And you two jumping into his apartment like raccoons didn't help. Their silence told me everything. The house felt like it deflated. Scarlett sank into the couch, holding her tissue like it was a lifeline. Bradley hovered near the table, pacing in small, tight circles like a Roomba with anger issues. I just sat there, waiting, because I knew what was coming next. You could smell it in the air. That sticky mix of panic and entitlement my parents exhaled whenever Anderson screwed up. Bradley finally stopped pacing and looked at me with that, I'm about to say something incredibly stupid expression he's perfected over the years. Colin, this is serious. You have to help us fix this. I leaned back. Bradley, if you want someone to fix this, maybe start with the guy who did it. He waved that off. You don't understand. Anderson isn't built for this kind of pressure. He'll fall apart. So will I said. Difference is, I'm not the one who hit someone with a car. Scarlett shook her head. We raised you better than this. I snorted. Yeah, you raised me to clean up after Anderson. I'm not doing it anymore. Bradley took a deep breath, the kind where he was trying hard not to yell and failing. Colin, if you say the substances were yours, no. If you say you borrowed the car earlier, no. If you at least tell them you were at the apartment, no. Scarlett finally looked up at me with this wounded expression like I had personally inflicted all of this. You're abandoning your brother in his darkest moment. He abandoned sobriety, I said, and reality, and apparently the concept of not committing crimes. Bradley's face turned a shade I'd only seen when he was trying to fix something. He broke himself, and failing. You always do this. You always make things harder. If you helped, none of this would be happening. There it was. The scapegoat anthem. Before I could answer, Scarlett's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and whispered, "It's him." She answered. Anderson's voice came through the speaker, hoarse, frantic, wobbling between anger and desperation. "Mom, what the hell is happening? They're saying I did all this stuff. I didn't do half of it. Tell Colin to fix it. He knows what to say." There it was again. Like I was the family's designated undo button. Scarlett practically begged into the phone. "Anderson, sweetheart, we're trying. Colin just needs more time." "Nope," I said, shaking my head. "Don't rope me into that." Bradley muted the phone and hissed, "Just tell him you'll help. Keep him calm." "I'm not telling him that." He glared. "Fine, I will," and unmuted the call. "Colin is working on something, son. It'll be okay." My jaw dropped. "Bradley, don't lie using my name." Anderson's voice cracked through the speaker. "Colin, you better not screw this up for me." I walked over and pressed the end call button myself. The room froze. Scarlett looked like she might faint. Bradley looked like he might throw the phone at my head. I looked like someone who was about 3 minutes away from walking out of this house forever. "Let me make this very simple," I said. "I'm not taking the blame. I'm not altering timelines. I'm not confessing to anything. Anderson made his choices. He can live with them." Scarlett whispered, "I can't believe this." "Oh, believe it," I said, "because you're about to need a hobby besides managing Anderson's disasters." And with that, I stood up. I walked out, leaving them in the silence they'd earned. I didn't hear from Bradley or Scarlett for a while after I walked out of their house, which honestly felt like someone turned down the background noise of my life. They still sent a few passive-aggressive texts. The usual, "We're disappointed in you," and "Family should stick together," all while conveniently forgetting the definition of family apparently excluded me when it came to emotional support, money, attention, or basic fairness. But whatever. Silence was better. Then the court stuff started. I wasn't trying to keep tabs on Anderson, but the legal system is surprisingly good at tossing updates into your lap, even when you're trying to just drink your coffee and mind your own business. Between relatives gossiping, Bradley posting rambling paragraphs on Facebook like an angry mayor, and my parents dramatically relaying every update like they were reporters at a crime scene, I pieced most of it together. Anderson had been granted bail with a bunch of conditions. You know, standard stuff for someone who'd managed to rack up multiple charges in one night. Show up for check-ins, don't use substances, stay in the area, avoid contact with certain people. Simple rules, the kind you'd expect a grown adult to follow if they wanted to avoid sitting in jail. First came the hearings. I wasn't planning to go. I had a job and a life and a desire not to be dragged into that circus. But my girlfriend convinced me that seeing it with my own eyes might make it easier to finally cut the emotional cord for good. So one morning, I put on a clean shirt, practiced a deep sigh, and walked into the courthouse like I was entering the season finale of a show I never meant to binge. The atmosphere inside was heavy. Bradley sat stiff in his seat like he was holding in a lecture he couldn't wait to deliver. Scarlett was clutching her purse like it contained the answers to life. Anderson was beside his lawyer, looking like a wreck, jittery, pale, and somehow still acting offended that he had to be there. Then Zoe entered. She wasn't dramatic about it. She wasn't even looking at Anderson. She walked in with this quiet steadiness, like someone who had rehearsed surviving something awful and figured, yeah, I can do this too. Just truth. The room went so silent you could hear Bradley grinding his teeth. Then came the medical evidence. Doctors explaining the substance found in her system and how it matched what was discovered in Anderson's apartment. Then came the witness from the hit and run, describing the impact, the panic, the blur of headlights, the fleeing car. Anderson stared straight ahead like if he didn't blink, he could pretend none of it applied to him. But the real twist, the one that made Bradley grab Scarlett's arm hard enough she flinched, came when the detective assigned to the case took the stand. He explained calmly that security cameras showed two people entering Anderson's apartment hours after the initial incident, moving things, touching surfaces, removing items. "Do you recognize these individuals?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," the detective replied. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker." Scarlett let out a noise I can only describe as the sound you make when your carefully constructed reality snaps in half. Bradley puffed up like a balloon about to pop. The prosecutor added, "This is being reviewed as potential interference with evidence." Then came Riley. She'd been subpoenaed after the prosecutor learned she'd kept records, and that some of those records lined up with what Zoe reported. She didn't look at Anderson either. She walked in with her shoulders squared, holding a folder. When she testified, she didn't cry. She read messages, played voicemails, showed screenshots, dates, times, all the things she had saved because some part of her knew she might need them one day. Anderson shrank down in his chair like a toddler caught lying about eating cookies. Except this wasn't cookies. This was years of documented instability and emotional damage. By the time the day ended, Anderson's case looked like a collapsing building being held up with string. The charges were stacking like bad Jenga moves, which naturally is when he decided to violate bail. About a week after that hearing, he skipped a check-in. Then he failed a test. Then he was spotted with people he wasn't supposed to be within 50 feet of. His lawyer probably aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The judge revoked his bail so fast, I'm pretty sure the sound barrier broke. Anderson was taken back into custody. Bradley posted a Facebook rant that could have been titled, "Why My Sons Are Disappointing, but One is Disappointing Correctly." "Scarlett tried calling me 5 times that night, but I let every call ring out. I had no energy left for their delusion marathon. Meanwhile, my life kept moving, like a normal life tends to do when it's not tied to a disaster. I got a promotion. My girlfriend and I moved into a bigger place. She told me she was pregnant, and for once I had something to look forward to that didn't involve cleaning up someone else's mess. We ended up doing a simple courthouse wedding a few months later. No big production, just paperwork, rings, and a quiet promise to do better than where I came from. It was a weird contrast. Anderson was sinking into the consequences he'd dodged for years, while I was quietly building an actual future. A stable one that didn't require lying, panicking, or pretending things were fine when they weren't. But just because I was done with them, didn't mean they were done with me. Far from it. If life had a soundtrack, the months after Anderson's bail got revoked would have been a weird mix of courtroom ambiance, distant family gossip, and my girlfriend humming while setting up a nursery. Not exactly the playlist I imagined for my 30s, but honestly, I'll take it over the soundtrack of crying, denial, and Bradley shouting at strangers. Anderson's sentencing came quicker than anyone expected. Turns out when you violate bail, leave the scene of a crash, have substances in your apartment, and accidentally create a PowerPoint of evidence against yourself, judges aren't exactly in the mood for leniency. His lawyer did what he could, but at some point even the best lawyer looks at your life and goes, "Yeah, man, I can't fix this." He ended up with a mix of actual jail time and long-term supervision. Not years and years, but enough that Bradley looked like someone stole his favorite golf clubs, and Scarlett acted like she was personally experiencing the fall of civilization. After sentencing, the civil lawsuits started rolling in like bonus rounds. Anderson definitely didn't earn. Zoe filed one. So did the hit-and-run victim. Insurance companies got involved. Lawyers got involved. Bradley and Scarlett had to start liquidating assets, investments, jewelry, some family heirlooms. Anderson's mess was expensive. Who would have guessed? Meanwhile, I was over here learning how to assemble cribs and stereotype-free baby clothes, debating paint colors, and pretending I understood stroller reviews. You know, normal adult things. Then came the day everything shifted. My daughter was born. She came into the world screaming like she knew she had opinions already. And honestly, mood. My wife cried in that relieved, exhausted way that makes your whole chest squeeze. I held this tiny person who trusted me without knowing anything about where I came from. And for the first time in a long time, nothing else mattered. This joy lasted exactly 6 days before my past decided to stick its head out of the trash can again. It started with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations, we heard the news." I stared at the message like it was a cursed object. Then another one came. "We'd like to meet our granddaughter." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The silence said everything. An hour later, Scarlett called from another number. Then Bradley. Then a restricted number. It was like the world's worst telemarketing campaign. Next day, my wife got a Facebook message from some cousin I barely remembered. "Your husband should let his parents meet the baby. They're devastated." Yeah, devastated they finally hit a wall they couldn't gaslight their way through. I blocked everyone. Wife blocked everyone. Peace returned. For about 4 days. On day 5, someone knocked on the door of my old apartment, the one I lived in 3 years ago. They either didn't know my new address or figured they could pressure me through the last place they had on file. My old neighbor texted me a photo of Bradley and Scarlett standing outside, holding a stuffed animal like they were auditioning for Grandparents of the Year, the delusional edition. They're knocking pretty aggressively, my neighbor wrote. I told him, feel free to call building security or an exorcist. 2 days later, my workplace called me into HR. Turns out Bradley phoned claiming he was concerned because I wasn't responding to urgent family matters. HR asked if I was in danger. I said, only from stupidity, and they closed the complaint immediately. Then Scarlett took to Facebook with a 3-paragraph essay about how heartbreaking it is when children are poisoned against their own parents, and how some people shouldn't be allowed to keep grandchildren away out of spite. My cousin screenshotted it for me, writing, sorry man, your mom's losing it. Shocking absolutely no one. Then came the peak delusion. A relative, one of the neutral ones who doesn't pick sides but somehow always knows the tea, reached out and said, your parents are talking about getting a lawyer. Something about grandparents' rights. I actually laughed, out loud, in public. Grandparents' rights? Against me? In this universe? If I wasn't already prepared to go no contact forever, that sealed it. Then, as if the universe wanted to wrap the whole saga up with the most predictable bow possible, I got a letter. From Anderson. It showed up in my mailbox looking like it had been folded by someone who doesn't understand how paper works. I opened it and immediately regretted it. It started with, bro, we need to fix the family before it falls apart, as if it wasn't currently in pieces because of him. Then, mom and dad say you're being unfair. And finally, when I get out, we can all sit down and talk. Don't turn your back on us. Us. Like I hadn't been their emotional punching bag for decades. I didn't even finish the letter. I dropped it straight into the shredder like it was a scam ad promising free cruises. That night, I took my phone, blocked every number I hadn't already, deleted every thread, unfollowed every connected relative, and told my wife, I'm done. Completely. For good. And that was it. Now it's just me, my wife, my daughter, and a home that doesn't run on denial or manipulation. No walking on eggshells, no favoritism, no pretending. And the best part? My daughter will grow up never knowing the disaster of a family I came from, only the one I built. That's enough for me. It's been a couple of years now, and honestly, life is almost suspiciously quiet compared to what it used to be. No surprise phone calls, no guilt trip messages, no relatives relaying concerns from Bradley and Scarlett. They finally got the hint, or ran out of energy. Either way, I'll take the peace. Anderson is still serving his time. Haven't heard a thing from him since that letter I shredded. If he ever grows up in there, good for him. If not, that's not my problem anymore. Bradley and Scarlett, well, last I heard, they sold the house and downsized. Lawsuits eat money faster than Anderson burned through opportunities, so I'm sure that didn't help. My daughter is walking now. Talking too. Mostly nonsense, sometimes demands, occasionally calling me Dada like I'm the most important person she's ever met. And you know what? That's the only title I've ever wanted. My wife and I built something stable, calm, and actually sane. No favoritism, no manipulation, just family. People say blood is thicker than water. Personally, I think it depends on how toxic the blood is. Either way, we're doing just fine without them, and that's the ending I can live with. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.